Good morning. I hope everybody had a great time yesterday. Hope everybody's having a wonderful morning. It's good to see you all. I have the pleasure this morning of introducing Jen Krieger. Some of you may know her because Jen, I knew her as Red Hat's chief agilist, but now she's the vice president of engineering operations at a little company you may have heard of, GitHub. She's been a tech enthusiast for over 25 years, delivering open source software. But she is most of all passionate about building strong, happy teams. And she built a few of the strong, happy teams that I've been on at Red Hat. So please, let me introduce Jen Krieger.
Thank you. I don't need that.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta laugh.
Gotcha.
Hi, everybody. As Sally said, I'm Jen Krieger, VP of Engineering Operations at GitHub. A lot of people ask me what that means on a regular basis. I don't run an infrastructure team. I run the business operations functions at GitHub. And what that generally means is whatever my boss needs done for the day is what I do for the day. And my boss is Mike Hanley, GitHub's Chief Security Officer and SVP of Engineering. And it's actually kind of delightful to work for him, as well as the team over at GitHub. And it's very different than my historical background of working at Red Hat and other tech companies, because the difference between what I had at Red Hat and what I have at GitHub is just the word speed. GitHub moves at the speed of light, and it took quite a bit of education, quite a bit of brain training for me to adapt from the culture of building open source software to the culture of deploying literally thousands of times a day. It was a culture shock for me. And so I have watched this industry, and Sally said 25 years. I wrote my bio 5 years ago. It's been 30 years as of this year that I have been in tech, and I have seen a lot of stuff happen. And when the team asked me to come and speak about AI today, I was like, I'm not talking about Copilot. So if you want me to talk about Copilot, that you probably need to invite somebody else. And they said, we don't really want you to talk about Copilot. We just want you to talk about AI and your opinion on it. And I said, okay, I can do that, right? I've got opinions. Those of you who know me know I have very strong opinions. And so today is no different. But first, we're going to start with a history lesson. And so 30 years of tech is a long time. And 30 years of tech, for many of us, we look at things from different point of views. So this is my point of view. This is based solely in my experience. So your experiences might be different. And I don't think that they're invalid because mine are different. So I just want to say that out loud. It also requires a little bit of systems thinking. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry, I gotcha. I'm going to talk about that too. So we're not going to start the history lesson 30 years ago. We're actually going to rewind only about maybe 8 months. This is the State of DevOps report that was released by the Google DORA team in October 2023. And what you'll see on the bar in the center is they have introduced a new classification of companies called elite, whatever that means, right? And I am specifically going to focus in on that top column, but you can see that 18% of the companies that they surveyed said they were in the elite status. So change lead time here for elite means they can deploy whatever they need to do in less than 1 day. How many of you actually work at a company or have existed at a company where you can do that? By show of hands? Great, so great, perfect. So now 30 years ago, so the company I was working at 30 years ago took 6 months to deploy changes that were simple. And what simple meant was changing the color of a button, updating text on a UI display. That's 6 months. Anything more complex than that took 18 months to 2 years. Think about that. This is an internal division building a tool for a financial organization that was doing financial modeling. And we took 18 months to deploy changes to the way that the financial model was working to our business partners internally. That's insane. So not only were they not on this chart, they were probably out the door somewhere in New Jersey, because the reality is that there was no way for them to ever be able to even consider being on this chart. And the reason why it took so long to do this was the code was tightly coupled. Anytime you changed one thing, you broke everything else. The testing was massive. It was gated by testing, and usually the testing took months because guess what? It was button clicking testing. And so there was a human with a mouse clicking on things and trying to figure out what was wrong. And so that was the state of software development when I entered into the industry 30 years ago. But development practices have drastically changed. Obviously they have. If people can now do what that team that I was working with at the time took 18 months to do, can do it in less than a day. And so let's look at some of those investments. And so Agile. How many of you have heard the word Agile before? How many of you actually hate the word Agile? Yes, I'm keeping my hand up. So in 2001, we introduced the adoption of this new business process called Agile. And while it had all the best intentions in mind, it really did a terrible job because it ignored one simple truth, which was none of this business process was going to work if the technical process wasn't enhanced to match it. And let's just be super clear, in 2001, there was not much automation on the market. There was not much decoupled code. Microservices were not a thing back then. And so there was still no possibility that engineering teams would be able to deploy code in 2 weeks, right? It was just not possible. But it did introduce one thing, which was iterative software development. And that allowed teams to start thinking differently about those massive business requirements documents that we would write 60 pages and then sign away our firstborn child because they were now accurate, right? This was the history. Like, I literally wrote those documents. That was my job when I first entered tech. And so iterative software development meant that we were able to start breaking down those gigantic pieces of work from something that would take 18 months to do to maybe something that would take maybe 3 months to do. The next thing that came along was DevOps transformation. And so this was kind of the technical world's response to the lack of that automation. And they started talking about the fact that they needed to actually automate the software delivery pipeline, and it was no longer optional. If the requirements were smaller and sitting in a bucket somewhere and not getting deployed, the risk of deploying them all at the same time was clear. It was clear to everyone. And so we started investing in automation. We started investing in those tools. And then finally, I'm going to say about 2015, because that's when the CNCF was created, cloud-native development started becoming a thing. And from my point of view, this was transformative for engineering teams, because the previous experience was somebody would code locally on their machine, spend all this time building something, and then go and put it on a server somewhere, and nothing would work. And no one knew why, because no one understood what the configuration of the server was, because the system admin wouldn't answer the questions, right? They were too busy keeping the server up because your code kept taking it down, right? And so there was not really a whole lot of flexibility or understanding of what that environment was. And so, I mean, honestly, the introduction of like one-click AWS instances that you could slap your app up there was transformative for teams, because they didn't have to worry about a lot of that FUD, right? They didn't have to worry about where they were putting their code. So we're due for the next wave. Maybe it's artificial intelligence. I really don't know. I will tell you, artificial intelligence has been around. The concept, machine learning, I kind of feel like it's just lipstick on a pig, if you know what I mean. Like, machine learning has been around since as long as I can remember. So this is nothing new. I think what's drastically changed from my perspective is just we've been able to process the data maybe faster than we were before, and so now we can actually get query results. Maybe the queries that we're doing are no longer if-then statements. They're actually like generative, and so things have advanced for sure. And regardless how you might personally feel about this, I have proof. I mean, working at GitHub, I have proof that companies are going to use these technologies whether you want them to or not. And so the reality is that they're already seeing the value of using these technologies. It comes from enabling smarter testing. Those of you who were around at the time understand that a lot of the automation movement may have also put some people out of a job for quality testing, for all those people who were clicking on mice and doing that manual test, who also did not have the skill set to learn how to code, did not move on in that profession. They had to seek other work. And I only know this from experience because I have friends who actually had that happen to them. And so this new boom obviously enables smarter testing. It obviously helps with automated code generation. If it's learning off of a code base, obviously it's going to help you understand what that code might be. And in the future, it will help with predictive maintenance. And so it is going to do things like, hey, I see you have that thing over there. Would you like me to fix it? Because I can do that. And you can take that step further. It's probably going to fix that thing without asking you in the future, right? It's just going to do that. The reason why I know it's just going to do that is because years ago, I was working with a tiny little team at Red Hat with Steph Walter. It was a cockpit team. And they had a bot that would sit there and auto-correct the common mistakes that that team was making as they were deploying code to their open source project. And so we already know, and this is like, just to be clear, this was like probably 8 to 10 years ago. We already know that this is possible. We just need to couple it with maybe smarter technology, if you would. And so all of this leads to safer, faster, and fundamentally, change. So I don't know about you, but pretty much everybody I work with has a very uncomfortable relationship with this word. You have an uncomfortable relationship with this word? We don't love change because change means something's changing. And every time somebody moves your cheese, that means you are likely having to learn something new. Your job is changing. It's already overwhelming to be you. And so when somebody says, could you just learn how to do something a little bit different? You're like, I've got too much on my plate. I can't deal with this. And there is a lot of skeptics, rightfully so. I'm one of them. I'm like, anything I ask of ChatGPT or Copilot, I always fact check it because I'm that person in the room who's like, is that true? But I'm here to tell you a little bit of a tip. A lot of this presentation was generated with AI. So bear with me as we explore this new technology together. I am using a tool called Beautiful AI, and it generates slides. And so for those of you who have been in PowerPoint hell in the past, that would be me. Google Slide hell, that would be me. This is a brilliant tool that just helps you put your talking points in and generates a beautiful view of your talking points. It's great. You don't have to become a slide designer. You can have somebody do that for you. And it's a good thing, right? It's a productivity tool. So let's talk about the cycles of change and how it actually impacts everybody in the room. Wow. Wow. Usually when I talk to developers about change, the instant thing that happens is, oh, well, this software changed, and now I've got all these things to do, and it's very, very tech-focused. It is rarely human-focused. And as you may know, I am a human-focused person, so I don't usually lead with tech. And so if I'm seeking information, some insight from anybody on how change is looked on from a human perspective, I rarely seek that information from the tech field. And so I found this video ages ago, and it kind of changed the way that I was thinking about change, and I want to share it with you today. One of our world leaders, Justin Trudeau, if you don't know him, it's about a minute long. Think about it.
The pace of change has never been this fast, yet it'll never be this slow again. There's enormous opportunity and enormous potential in that realization. Technology has always brought such promise. A better standard of living, new innovations, remarkable products. Consider the progression from steam power to electricity to computers. But it also brings dramatic shifts in our social, economic, and political cultures. This current step, involving automation and AI as the obvious examples, will totally revolutionize the world of work, and in many ways, it already has. As business leaders, I know that you view these as both exciting and challenging achievements. You're rightly anxious about how quickly our existing business models are being disrupted. Still, if you're anxious, imagine how the folks who aren't in this room are feeling. Workers, people who aren't seeing the benefits of economic growth, regular women and men who are trying to grab a rung on the career ladder, never mind climate. For them, technology is a benefit to their personal lives, but a threat to their jobs.
So that really describes the way I feel about AI today, because I see the same thing that happened to my friends 30 years ago is going to happen again. I already know this. If I am using a slide presentation deck that auto-creates things for me, eventually that might indicate something, right? Who knows? If I am using ChatGPT to auto-generate documentation for my application, that might mean something long-term, right? And so being aware of this social change, because it is a social change, folks, it's not just technical. Everything we do from this point forward has massive impact on each and every one of us in this room and each and every one of us on this planet. And we have to be socially responsible about what we are doing. And so this quote says it all. And Justin Trudeau, in case you missed it, was saying in 2018, folks, if you can't do math in your head, it's 6 years ago. So if we were already worried 6 years ago, where might we be today? The average, American doesn't really get tech. They don't really understand ChatGPT. I don't just have tech friends out of work. I have a friend who's a speech-language pathologist, and we joke all the time about the fact that the second she gets near to any technical device, it crashes. That's her. She doesn't understand a bit about what's going on here. She doesn't understand what it's going to do to her job. She doesn't understand what it's going to do to her livelihood. And that's scary for her, because if she doesn't have her job, she can't eat. She can't take care of her children. So please keep that in mind as you're making decisions. Systems thinking, it's kind of there. So let's do a higher level recap here. So software development, the process has massively changed, and it's the fastest it has ever been, and it will continue to go faster as time goes on. You can guarantee that. People are worried about the impact of AI. I don't think any of us would disagree with this. I think everybody can find something to be worried about, unless you're heading into retirement, like maybe I am shortly, hopefully. And they simply want to know how to incorporate these new skills into their jobs so they can also evolve, right? I've always told people, don't be fearful of change, embrace it and learn from it so that you can evolve yourself. It will always help you actually be on the forefront and make sure you're always employable if you do adapt and think about that change. And so let's bring a little bit of systems thinking in here. Systems thinking is a problem-solving approach that considers the system as a whole, not just its individual parts. And if we apply systems thinking to the state of where we are as an industry and consider the system as a whole, perhaps there are other people involved in the act of creating software. And so we're going to think about some of those people, i.e. the product manager. So how many of you work with product management here, or some form of the business, right? You probably think, because the last 30 years of tech advancement means that the product managers have a lot of tech advancement too, right? Right? Anybody? Anybody? So I'm using this definition because it suits my needs for the purpose of this presentation, so yay. For product management, they're specifically supposed to identify customer needs so that your requirements are actually going to solve what that customer is looking for. And you might consider that the current landscape of a product management's workload looks identical to yours. Very automated, very streamlined. They have tasks in line. They know what's coming next. And honestly, if you're sitting in the hall in this audience and saying, I don't know what you're talking about, Jen, because I don't have that. Super, super sorry. You should probably work with your team to maybe change that. And so if your business is trying to sell enterprise-grade software to their customers, you would imagine that they would be investing in productivity for all roles surrounding the software development lifecycle, just like we've invested in the tech space. But you're going to be wrong, because right now what I see, and as I have said on the slide, this is a very jaded view, so if you are a product manager and you're like, that's not true, Jen, like, just bear with me. Lack of streamlined processes. And so product managers, by the way, in case you didn't know this, don't have the ability to do what you all might have the ability to do, which is if you see something that you've done more than once, you likely are going to automate it out of your task, especially if it's something you don't want to really be doing. I literally had someone tell me literally 10 minutes ago that they have figured out how to automate all their emails, so they're really not getting any email anymore, right? And so this is an example of somebody who's taking care of something that's been irritating. Product managers can't do that. Even if they do have coding, it's not their core job or business responsibilities, so they're not going to spend all day in a CLI writing code to help improve their situation. So I'm afraid to tell you, no, they don't have any streamlined processes. They also have difficulty prioritizing the 10 gabillion, jillion, trillion things that they have to do every day. And even worse, most product managers are at the mercy of interrupt-driven work, which means every time you ping them, which by the way you also hate, they are getting interrupted from what they are doing right at that moment to answer whatever the question you have. And then finally, they have limited visibility. So these two things behind that, so like lack of streamlined processes equals probably a chaotic day, equals probably not able to answer all the questions, or when you are answering questions, you're probably answering them maybe not the most kind way, and so you are probably degrading relationships with your business partners. And there's already a consensus relationship by design between product and engineering, so that's just exasperated by the fact that these folks are overwhelmed, understaffed, and in a lot of cases, not capable of doing what you need them to do, which is just simply tell them what the customer said, right? And so how does this work if your business is trying to sell enterprise software? So by show of hands, how many of you are selling enterprise software? Or at least working on enterprise software? So the good portion of you all. So here's more information to shove in your brain. This was generated by AI, this definition. I love this tool. It's great. It gave me a definition. I read it and I said, yeah, this is about right. It's probably not fully accurate, but it's good enough. I'm okay with it. And I'm going to focus in on one word, which is the word secure. And I do this because I like my boss, and he's our chief security officer. And we often talk about what secure code means. Good Lord, what does secure code mean? I don't know. Every customer thinks the definition of that is different. And so how do you as a developer understand what the requirements are to release something securely if your product manager doesn't even know? So by show of hands, do you know what secure code means? Yeah? Frank, I call you on that. So like, even Dan Walsh went like this. So I'm telling you right now, if Dan Walsh is going like this, you don't know, right? I don't know. And you would probably go to a product manager to inform you on what that might mean, because while you might have a good technical understanding, that doesn't always indicate what the customer actually wants you to do. Let's just be frank. It's not the same thing, folks. And so that's really where the crux of this problem is. And I assure you, while product managers would love to sit down and share that opinion with you, they don't have the time. I just told you why. And so they are at a point now where they just are, they're struggling. They're struggling, and I don't blame them for struggling. And so why does this matter? So the widening gap between product and engineering is just going to simply equal, at the end of the day, frustrating customer experience. And we all do not work at companies. I'm here to tell you now, there is always going to be a requirement to make money when you are employed by a company. That is not going to go away, I'm sorry to tell you. And so even if you're working on an open source project, somebody is paying your salary and they require you to make money. And so what happens when you have unhappy customers? Yeah, they stop giving you money, right? Like they stop giving you money. And so basically what winds up happening is over time, your customers get more frustrated with your, and by the way, this is totally a joke slide. If you can't read the bottom thing, it says very accurate financial data from some company that is absolutely made up. And the reason why this slide is so brilliant is because it was auto-generated. And I said, I didn't even give you numbers. How can you put together a slide like this? And so I was like, great, I love this because it's like literally makes no sense and I'm gonna use it because it's a joke. But what happens when customers are frustrated is they start looking for tools that are gonna fill the need that your tool does not give to them. And if you are not right on top of it, if you are not able to deploy those things those customers need in less than a day, you are gonna lose their business, and it's already happening. And it happens all the time, folks. And so missed customer expectations equals folks not renewing their software equals lost revenue equals a decline in the business to be able to do things like, pay you. And so that is a problem. And so those of us in the room who say this make me want to go like this, because products don't sell themselves. Even ice cream trucks sell their product because they play a music as they're coming down your street so that you know to get up off your chair, to run downstairs, to grab that $5 from your mom's wallet, and to run outside and get your ice cream cone, right? Even ice cream trucks have to sell the thing that we all genuinely probably want to eat, right? And so that implies there's somebody else on the other side that has to do that marketing. So how many of you remember the mystery color Heinz ketchup? Oh yes, some people. There was purple ketchup at one point, folks. Mystery color. Who wants to buy mystery colored ketchup? Okay, yeah, see, Heinz is missing the mark. Like now that all the 80s kids have grown up, we all want mystery colored ketchup. How many of you love the new UI on Amazon Prime? Great, neither do I. I hate it. I can't search for the videos I have purchased. I can't index them. I can't, if I want to say, show me all the horror videos I've purchased over the course of the last 8 billion years that I've been an Amazon Prime customer, I can't do that. I have to scroll through all of them to look at all the titles and remember, why the hell did I buy that movie? Because it was the worst movie I have ever watched, but now it's forever in my brain that I will always have to be reminded that I bought it. And so this is an example of, yes, products don't always sell themselves, and they don't always do the things that customers want them to do. And so you kind of need somebody to help you out. And so why did this happen? So back in the very early part of my career, 2001, you might have heard about that word agile. Well, the CTO that I reported to at the time was some sort of executive conference and came back and she was like, yay, agile. And that was the first time I heard that word. It was literally, yay, agile. I'm not joking. I am not making that up. And she said, we're all gonna take a 5-day training class, and when we get out of that training class, we're gonna know how to do agile, and everything is gonna work great. I think you have heard me say this before. That was the start of the worst 2 years of my career. And the reality is that everything wasn't great. And the reason is because we tossed developers into this process. They looked at the process and said, that's not going to work for us. We know why it's not going to work, but we can't articulate why it's not going to work, because then that just sounds like complaining, and we don't want to expose the fact that we're coding on one development laptop and sharing that development laptop around when we need to share code with each other, because that's probably not a good idea, right? By the way, that laptop went on a trip and got lost, and we lost weeks of code at one point, so yeah, that sucked. So let's just keep that in mind. And so when we were doing all that work, one simple thing happened that I think maybe some of you know, which is the business didn't join us for the conversation. So there was no one in the room when we were actually defining what we were going to do. So we were left to our own devices. And that's just the common refrain through the ages. So the business never got the opportunity to understand what it might look to do iterative development. They never understood how to break down the work that they have in front of them. They only understand the thing that takes 3 to 5 years to make. And so they're working at the pace of 3 to 5 years still, right? The other thing that happened is the further divide from those two mentalities. And so here was this person over here going really fast, or at least trying to. And here's this person over here saying, you promised every 2 weeks, and you're still not delivering every 2 weeks, but you said you were going to do this every 2 weeks, right? Right? And so you could imagine the divide becoming further and further because humans are going to human, and they're going to be irritated at one another in the workplace. And so just as a note, also at the same time, we were trying to upgrade .NET from version, I think like 1 to 3, and we were like, it will take us like 7 months, no worries. It took us 3 years. And during that time, we could make no enhancements to the system at all. So effectively held the business hostage for 3 years. That's the reality of what was going on back then. So you might think that that would create some lack of happy feelings between the two groups, thus creating more silos, and also resistance to change. And so let's take that back to that product manager who has that interrupt-driven day with 10,000 things to do, and the first thing they started their day with was a customer escalation that was so thoughtfully given to them by yours truly, because you were the one who deployed that code that might have caused that customer escalation. And so that's how they start their day. They probably are not going to have a whole lot of mental space to, have bright and, bushy-tailed Jen Krieger come to them and say, do you want to change your processes to maybe try to do things a little bit more easy? Their answer is going to be like, yeah, no, thank you. I've got too much to do. And I just got chewed out by a customer, so I'm not interested in talking to you about process, right? And so this is just what I saw over the course of 30 years. And it's still happening today. You still have this happening in every single organization on the planet. There might be some unicorns out there that don't have this happening, but I have not yet heard about them. So if you do know of them, let me know. So how could AI improve the product manager's work? So this is one specific example. I've got 2 others. Oftentimes, over the course of my career, I've heard product managers going out to customers. They say, I'm talking to a customer, I'm going to write down all my notes, and I'm going to share the notes with you so you can read them too and gain the insight. And if you're working for a company that's like mid-size, there's probably like 60 to 100 product managers in that organization supporting an engineering organization. And each of them, even if they're only doing 1 customer conversation a week, that's between 60 to 100 documents full of customer insights. Multiply that by 3 months, you can imagine how many documents you're meant to read. And somewhere along the line, in those documents, probably says something about what secure code means and all the different opinions from the customers in those different documents, right? And somehow a product manager is meant to read all that stuff and come up with a centralized opinion, right? How many of you think that's actually possible? Because it's not. Y'all know what a backlog looks like. Y'all know once the thing goes off the end of the screen, you forget about everything that's on the bottom, right? So humans really only are able to keep a certain amount of data in their brain in order to make decisions off of it. And so this is equaling the word bias, folks. This is recency bias. And so recency bias is going to define what your product manager might be saying to you. What did the customer last say to them? Is likely what they're going to say is the requirement. But it's not going to represent what all the customers are thinking because they don't have the ability to keep all that information in their brain. So gosh, does anybody know of a tool that might be layered on top of all those documents that could potentially do that analytic for them in a very quick and easy way? Because I do, and I'm going to tell you that it's probably already happening because we all know that it's just not possible to do what I just described. And yet those documents are probably the single most important thing with the most important insights that you all need to be able to code what you're doing effectively and not have to go back and do it again and again and again and again. The other thing is automated workflows. And so those repetitive tasks that kind of irritate you, that you just kind of take care of and you push away, these folks also need help with this automation. And it's like answering the same question over and over and over again. I assure you, if you are asking your product manager a question, 9 other people have asked them that question in the last week. And so wouldn't it be wonderful if you had like some sort of bot you could put on top of those documents and you could query it and you could ask it questions? Because there is one. We have it at GitHub. And so we like using it. It's fun. Primarily using it for IT questions. And so, gosh, how do I log into my laptop when my Ubi key isn't working? That might be a common question, and maybe we don't need to beleaguer an IT support desk person to ask that question over and over again, right? And so there are tools that can do this for us, and companies should embrace them. And then finally, intelligent assistants. And so how many of you are scheduling meetings all day long? I'm going to leave my hand up. I'm actually not anymore. Product managers have to meet with customers. They likely don't have executive assistants doing this work for them, but there are tools on the market that could actually look at their calendar and look at somebody else's calendar and move the meeting around based on what makes the best sense for everybody. And you can also define what you want to see so that an intelligent assistant can go and change your calendar without you even knowing and make it optimized for everyone on the meeting. It's brilliant. For those of us who have had to do the mental math of how to get 10 people's worth of calendars into one meeting urgently, understand the value of what I am saying. They exist. These tools exist. Find them and use them. So we could do all those things, or we could change what we are thinking and take a systems approach. So does a product manager need to decide all things in order for a product to be good? The answer to this question, what do you think? Is it no? Is it yes? Well, it depends, unfortunately. And here's the reason why. So what you're seeing up here, you can, I put the link to the paper. A bunch of students, I believe they're students, went and sat with Spotify's team in June of 2023, and they basically logged every time Spotify engineers made a decision. Who made the decision? What was their delegation? Like, did they have to get information from above, or were they allowed to make this decision? And they put together a lovely eye chart that describes how Spotify makes decisions. This is an example of a company that actually understands how humans work, and they try their best to actually set that context. So companies should also be doing this work. So if you don't understand what decision you are allowed to make, like for example, right in the middle here, squads decide what process to follow and how to ensure the quality of work outcomes. How many of you have asked me, should I do a stand-up? You should all, everybody at Red Hat should raise their hands, even if you didn't ask me, because it was literally the single most asked question while I was there. The answer is, I don't care. I don't care because I am not on your team. And so do what your team wants to do. If it works for you, do it. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. But you might see in the top right, the top right, that long-term visions require strategic leadership to make a decision. And the reason that likely is because in order to do that 3 to 5 year thing, you're probably not just using one team to get it done. You're probably using a group of teams. And so that person making that decision is likely that highest level leader who owns all of those teams, or has to collaborate with another leader who has the other side of the teams. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. It makes a lot of sense to me. So there's a lot of information on the market about what companies should be doing to combat this new thing. Let's talk about one of them, though, right? So I believe Kelsey talked about this on Tuesday at the AI think tank and maybe mentioned some of this yesterday in his keynote. But I don't know of a lot of companies that invest in upskilling their employees. They just don't. The history of my career, that 30 years until I got to GitHub, I had to beg, borrow, and steal for every dollar I spent to get educated. In a lot of cases, I spent a massive amount of money out of my own pocket. I paid for my MBA out of pocket. I paid for every Agile certification I had out of pocket. This is really tragic because I'm standing on stage here at the level I am in as a VP at GitHub, which is fancy and great, and I would not have gotten here without that education, without the curiosity that I invested in myself. And let's just be super clear, not everybody can do this. I had different financial obligations than the majority of humans on this planet. And so I was able to drop $3,500 on a class without even thinking about it on a semi-regular basis. That is not the lived experience of most humans on this planet. And so companies should be investing in their employees in order to upskill everyone. Because gosh, if you didn't know this, it's incredibly expensive to replace a lost employee. You're talking time to hire, on average between 1 month to 3 months if you're lucky. You're talking onboarding, 3 to 6 months depending on the technology. That is almost a year's worth of time lost between the point that somebody left the company to the point that you have a productive individual again. So many of us in this room are not at the point in our careers where we make these decisions, right? There are no CEOs in this room, right? No CEOs, no C-level employees, maybe on the phone, who knows? So we don't own this. We can feel irritated about it, we can try to fight for it, but we don't own the decision. So what can you do? The simple thing that I can share with you that you should do is become a systems thinker. Think about everyone in your ecosystem that is required to do a thing. Don't forget about your partner teams. Don't treat them with irritation because you know now what their situation really looks like. And you should embrace that because it's real. It's real. You are all likely experiencing some form of that already. And so you are also irritated. If you think it's not mutual, I am here to tell you it's wrong. Think about the wider system. Every time you make a decision about what you are doing, you are impacting other people. You're impacting all those people that Justin Trudeau talked about being fearful of losing their jobs. Make your choices intentionally and don't narrow your focus. Honestly, I really felt it yesterday when Kelsey said, like 30 years from now, there's going to be a new group of people that are going to be cleaning up the messes of the mistakes we're making today, because we're still cleaning up the mistakes that we made 30 years ago. We haven't finished that work. And I just see us accelerating via faster deployment towards even more mistakes. And I'm just asking everybody to simply choose a different way, be kind to your fellow employees. Thanks. I'm Jen Krieger. Okay, that's great.
I have a slide for you that I generated while I was sitting here.
Yeah.
Because that ice cream truck one made me go into a tailspin. And I made a slide of a sales guy selling a bunch of ice cream truck drivers ice cream trucks. And I put an ice cream truck on the slide. And I was like, the product sells itself.
Product sells itself.
I think that would be really meta and hilarious. So
Yeah.
I beg you I will send it to you.
Okay, I'd love to see it, Scott. Thanks.
You mentioned several times there are great tools for consolidating product requirements and architecture docs and ADRs and whatever else. Are there any practical suggestions off the tip of your tongue from you or anyone else here?
The things that I know of, like the things that I knew people were experimenting with were like 3 to 5 years ago. And so I'm not aware of current tools on the market that do this. But I will tell you, like, I've seen what ChatGPT can do just based on my own, working with it. Also, this tool seemed to be very intuitive in the way it allows for you to generate a slide based off of your slide notes. And so I understand at one point ChatGPT did not let you ingest a huge amount of data into it, but it's changing. And I could see there being some sort of company out there at some point in the near future that takes a repository of maybe Google documents and overlays ChatGPT type technology on top of it that could potentially be queried or asked questions of. The only caution I have for y'all is that you should really be suspicious of whatever it says out of it. It's not the answer, it's the start of the investigation, if you would.
That's what I want to.
Yeah, if anybody has one, see this guy in the baseball cap.
Yeah, I did want to say that I'm sure that your MBA was super helpful in building some of those tools for doing the evaluations. But I'm wondering if there's not some sort of out-of-the-box kind of complex systems model and methodology that you were looking at very specifically.
In reference to what? Sorry, I don't.
In reference to becoming more of a systems thinker.
Yeah, so the Lean Institute is the best way to do so. It is lean process improvement. It's buzzwords, but honestly, Toyota manufacturing, if you haven't looked into anything about how Toyota makes cars, it's pretty transformative. I highly recommend reading about it because it's just hard to tell the story. But the reality is that it's kind of like the whole concept of anybody on the line can stop the line based on what they see going wrong. And they do a lot of each individual step along the manufacturing process has full clarity of what's supposed to happen. And because of that, they're able to inspect where things are not going well and see the system that works as a whole. So you might imagine this would be hard to do in software development. I assure you it is not. I've seen it happen. But if you're a car manufacturer, every piece on the line has to happen at exactly the right time because there's another piece coming, and it's all automated. And so if something's broken over here, it's going to back everything up. And so that is what helps you become a full systems thinker in terms of how you're thinking. Where did something come from? Where is it going after it leaves your purview?
So with the exponential change consistently growing and the way that our systems are changing along with that, what are one or two human side aspects of change and how you help your teams manage that?
Yeah, you got to get outside. You got to stop sitting at your desk all day. GitHub is an async company, which means we don't have a traditional 9-to-5 desk job. I sit at my desk from 9 to 5 because I have anxiety about leaving my desk. I was that employee at that tech company that had to wear nylons and heels every day to work. And if I checked in, punched, I'm not joking, punched my card at 9:01, I would get yelled at, right? And so I still have that sitting in the back of my head. And I also know that I am a human. And part of what we talk about at GitHub, which I really enjoy, is that if your brain isn't working that day, then maybe you shouldn't try to make it work. And so I know that my brain works better in the afternoon. So I don't try to read documents in the morning. I don't try to sit down and make decisions in the morning because I know I'm probably going to miss something. And I also know if I am super stressed out and I need a break, if I also try to do something just to get it done, the likelihood of me making a mistake is pretty high. And so there's one pro tip for y'all. Step away from your desk. Take a freaking lunch break, people. It's okay. You earned it. It's not important for you to be at your desk for 16 hours a day. It's just not.
How do you make that okay for your teams?
Say that?
How do you make that okay for the teams?
It's not okay for my teams. I work at one of the fastest companies I've ever worked for in my life. Project managers, I like to tell them all the time, are like the blob. If we see a space that might not have blob in it, we blob into that space. Because the job that we do is taking care of whatever people aren't actually getting done. So we just do everything, right? And if you're doing everything, you are working super long hours. So we work constantly on well-being, constantly on trying to help people understand that you're not going to get ahead if you're sitting at your desk for more than 8 hours a day. You're just not going to get ahead that way. And likelihood, what's going to wind up happening is that time, that lack of break that you're doing to yourself is eventually going to wind up into that word burnout. And at that point, there's a whole other slew of problems that come with that make you not healthy. And as somebody who has been in full burnout, I'm telling you right now, you do not want to be there. It is incredibly hard to recover, both mentally and physically. And I just don't think it's worth, companies, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it.
I think we're out of time.
Yes,
Thank you.
We're out of time. Thanks, everybody. By the way, I have stickers over on the table.